Hello, everyone. Let's take us through our birth order myth reading analysis questions. Okay, so we are beginning here looking at, questions. Question 1. It says read lines 1 through 3. So that's that first little bit here. No wonder he's so charming and funny. He's the baby of the family. She works hard trying to please the boss. I bet she's a firstborn. Anyone that's selfish has to be an only child. So A says, what follows the dash? So when we look at the reading here, right, we have our dash right here. This is our dash. So what follows the dash? This line, he's the baby of the family. No wonder he's so charming and funny. He's the baby of the family. In other words, the speaker, who's not the author, is offering this as the reason, right? They're saying, of course, it's no wonder they're charming and funny. The belief is that babies of the family, the youngest, is going to be charming and funny. And that's a common myth. And so we have here after the dash, the reason they are so charming and funny. So I'm going to just put that in with my pen here. All right, and the answer for 1A is 1. And as I just said, kind of jumped ahead, what does that mean to be the baby of the family? Well, baby of the family doesn't mean that you are still a baby or that you're still young. It means you are the youngest of that family, the youngest child in that family, right? So it's of the family. You can be quite old, but if you are the youngest sibling, you are the youngest child throughout your life. And then on letter C here, a selfish person, according to, kind of looking at these myths, anyone that's selfish has to be an only child. Someone who is selfish is only caring or thinking about themselves. You're caring about the self. So we have number 3 for 1C. All right. And then we discussed this in class a bit. These are not the author's beliefs. Okay? There's a reason they're in quotation marks, and they're not direct quotes from one particular person. They are not facts being presented based on research. These are common myths. These are things that we often hear people say. And so our answer here is birth order myths. That takes us through our first page here. Next, we go to lines 5 through 8. 5 through 8. We're going to drop down here back in our text. All right, so really starting here, here's 5. And I'm going to just start with our first full sentence. However, most of the research claiming that firstborns are radically different, something radically, very, very different from other children, has been discredited, right? So, and it now seems that any effect of birth order on intelligence or personality will likely be washed out by all the other influences in a person's life. All right, so we're looking at discredited. All right. We are giving a scientific source. We're saying, well, it's credited to this. We look at our root word credit and dis. It's it's no longer, uh, you know, it's been found to be wrong, right? So it's not proved to be correct. It's discredited, found to be wrong, found to be wrong. All right. Okay. And influences here. Well, let's go back into our text a little bit. All right, so where it seems, other influences. Seems that any effects of birth order on intelligence or personality will likely be washed out by all the other influences on a person's life. And so when we think about what influences us, right? What has an impact? If we're influenced by something, we're impacted in our personality and who we are. And so, right, being the youngest or being the oldest, being the middle child, there's so many other things that influence us. How we were raised, who our parents were in terms of just personality themselves. 5:57 a.m. are going to have, more of an impact here. 5:57 a.m. So our influences, right? Those are the effects, all the things that have an effect on us, right? Our individual interests, who we are. This statement means that as a result of other influences, the effect of birth order will disappear. It's washed out, right? All the other influences are going to impact us so much that anything that might have been some kind of influence, some kind of effect based on being the youngest or the oldest or an only child will disappear. It really just gets watered down by all these other influences around us as we are growing up. All right, 8 through 11. I'm going to 8 through 11 here. What information, let me go first down to 8. I'm going to start right here. In fact. All right, we'll start line 8 there. In fact, the belief in the permanent impact of birth order, according to Tony Falbo, a social psychologist at the University of Texas at Austin, comes from the psychological theory that your personality is fixed by the time you're 6. That assumption is simply incorrect. So there's my phrase, in fact. And they're saying the belief that the permanent impact of birth order, according to the social psychologist, saying that's based on this theory, right? This older theory that who you are at 6 years old is who you are the rest of your life. If you are, someone who keeps to yourself, or if you're very outgoing, your likes, your dislikes, wherever or whoever you are at 6, that kind of sticks around. And you say that assumption that who you are at 6 is simply who you are, right? The science tells us that's incorrect. If you think about who you were as a child, you might find that you've changed over the years or over the decades. Our personalities change. They're impacted by all kinds of factors, our educations, our families, our friends, our life experiences, right? Things that we maybe choose to change or think about as we grow. And so the science is showing us this assumption that who we are at 6 is permanent is simply incorrect. The science shows that that does not work. And so we're given some options here. Is it true information about birth order, information about Tony Falbo, information to support the previous idea? Well, this is giving us true information about birth order. The fact that, you know, it's going to be a permanent influence is not correct. And so we have for that one, true information about birth order. What does the science actually tell us? Now, they do give us some information about Tony Falbo here a little bit. I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to grab my pen, and I want to remind everyone, we talked about these a little bit, right? These little commas here. This is a positive phrase. And this is additional information about Tony Falbo. Who is Tony Falbo? You know, and we talked a little bit about what the social psychologist was, right? So the psychology of groups of people. When we look at the word social, we're talking about society, and how we interact with others. So this is really just kind of some background information on Tony Falbo. And you'll often see this in academic writing. This is why or with what authority Tony Falbo is speaking. It's, you know, why should we listen to this person? Is this more opinion like we have in our first three lines, or is this you know, someone who has really studied this, maybe written about it, and had other scientists you know, kind of look at the work through peer review, right? But this background information about Tony Falbo is not the point of this sentence. That little a positive phrase there is really just to reinforce why we should, you know, maybe listen to or value Tony Falbo's opinion that, you know, the permanent you know, the permanent impact of birth order is simply incorrect. Right? So that additional information is just useful in proving the point that is being made there. Right, so we have number 4. All right, going to our next here. In line 8, the word impact. All right, so 8, the permanent impact. I'm going to grab yet another highlight here. Much smaller for my text. Okay, the permanent impact. So if you looked up the word impact, you're going to get in a dictionary, or again, I always recommend the free dictionary.com, because it does a good job of giving different definitions in different contexts. And it also has that nice pronunciation button, so you can hear the words in North American English and in, you know, British English accents. So impact, when we think about impact, you could hear people say things like brace for impact. You know, something is hitting something else hard. That's the very physical, you know, use of the word. But things impact us in our life, right? We're impacted in our lives by many different factors, right? Again, who we are is impacted by you know, who our family is, you know, socioeconomics, our culture, our childhood experiences, our educations, kind of our personalities that are unique to us and influenced by different things. So the fact that it has, a permanent impact, a permanent change throughout our lives, they're saying is simply incorrect. And so as I'm looking at my 4B here, impact is really looking at the word effect. What is the effect here? How are we affected by birth order? And then what word in these sentences is a synonym? It's a synonym for assumption. Remember that a synonym means it has a similar meaning. That's just a quick kind of trick to remember synonym versus antonym. Synonym, similar meaning, almost the same meaning, or an antonym has an opposite meaning. So a synonym for assumption. And let's go back here. Let's see, back into our reading. The assumption, that assumption simply is incorrect. So here, another word for assumption would be belief. Be belief. So one thing I can do when I'm looking at my synonyms or my vocabulary and just looking put in the context is putting it back into the sentence, right? When we talk about context, we're talking about the surrounding words and the surrounding ideas. So that belief simply is incorrect. Well, what belief? The belief that our personality is fixed. That assumption, right? Assumption is something we believe to be true, often without other information, right? So it's very much like myths. Myths are things that are believed to be true. All right, so we have belief there. For number 5, I'm looking at question 5 now on page 27 of our textbooks, and we have quite a few questions about some vocabulary here and how it's being used. I'm going to go to 13 through 16. It says read lines 13 through 16. Again, part of why I think it's useful to kind of do the walkthrough on the reading analysis questions. It's not just did I find the right answer, but the process, right? How am I looking back and really looking very closely at the text, right? So here we go. Again, here's 13. I'm going to start at the first full sentence. Okay, we're talking about we're two Swiss scientists. When two Swiss social scientists, okay, so these are social scientists similar to Tony Falbo. When two Swiss social scientists, Cecil Ernst and Jules Engst, those are the names of our two social scientists. Again, we have this a positive renaming who those two Swiss social scientists are. Reviewed 1,500 studies a few years ago. They concluded that birth order differences in personality are non-existent in our sample. In particular, there is no evidence for a firstborn personality. And so they ask, looking at 5A, what do the dots, what do the dots between personality and R indicate? So let's go back. And let me go back here. I like my rainbow pen there, the I know it can be distracting too. So it's talking about these 3 dots. And this is actually a punctuation in English called an ellipse and ellipses. Okay, so those 3 dots have different uses depending on where we find them in English writing. But this is a particular use in we're looking at a quote, right? Notice we have a quote here, our quotation marks. In other words, the author of this article we are reading is quoting Cecil Ernst and Jules Angst. And so these three dots, this ellipses, is letting us know that words have been deleted. And there's a lot of rules around when you can do this. This was a scientific paper that is being quoted. And so in this case, we don't need all of it, right? We don't want a large section here. They really just want to quote the part of what they were saying that directly talks about what these studies found, or what their review of these studies found. And again, there are rules on this, what you can and cannot cut out. You cannot cut out or anything that's going to change the meaning. You need to make sure you are being true to what the original authors intended. And so when I look at 5A here, this is just number one. Some words have been deleted. Okay. And what about non-existent? What about non-existent? So here's our word non-existent. I'll just go back. Right. They're non-existent in our sample. Well, what is non-existent? Birth order differences in personality. Right? Birth order differences in personality. There's no evidence, right? So non-existent, if something is non-existent, it doesn't exist, right? You might be thinking, I probably, or maybe you did, get that answer without going back in. The goal with all of these questions, the reading and analysis questions, is to really have you go back in, of course, and take a closer look at some of the details. But when I look at just my word non-existent, of course we can say, well, my root word here is exist. My root word here is exist. Something exists. It is. If you are taking grammar, you certainly probably started with the verb to be in English, right? To be, it exists, it is. And then we have our prefix non. It does not exist. It is not there. And so the evidence here is non-existent. There's no evidence to show that it's going to have, birth order is going to have this impact. So I have 5B. My answer is 3. I have go to 5C. In particular, what does in particular mean in this context? And really, this is one where I will say in particular really always means specifically, right? So if I'm just looking at just my definition here, in particular means specifically, but I am going to go back in, right? In particular, there's no evidence. So again, this helps me understand this section a little bit more, beyond just knowing the meaning of the word or the phrase in particular, being specifically. But let's just switch it out, right? And say, okay, this is specifically is a synonym for in particular. Birth order differences in personality are non-existent in our sample. Specifically, there is no evidence for a firstborn personality. So differences in personality The study showed, or the study of the studies, you call it meta-analysis, showed we don't have an impact here because of birth order, but specifically what their review of these 1,500 studies really showed, and showed over and over, is that specifically when we're talking about firstborn personality, right? What's the impact of being the eldest child in a family, the firstborn to a family? That does not exist, right? A specific firstborn personality does not exist, right? That takes me through 5. Let's go on here. Oh, nope, one more for 5. Evidence. Evidence. What does evidence mean? Well, again, we already jumped ahead, as I tend to do here. There's no evidence. There's no, there's no proof, right? We're talking in this passage about myths versus science. Science looks at proof. Myths are often fun to believe. They get passed down. Myths are, something that exists in all cultures for all people, right? We could like to believe a lot of things that maybe seem good to us, but science looks at, is there evidence? Is there proof, right? So evidence is talking about proof, something to back it up. All right, now we go to lines 18 through 19. So I'm just looking at my lines here, 15, 16, 18 here, 18 and 19. And again, I'm going to the first, I'm getting to the first sentence here in line 18. Take family size. Plenty of surveys showed that eldest children were overrepresented among high achievers. Okay, so I'm just going to stop right there for my 2 sentences, my 2 lines, I should say. And I'm going to look at A, take family size. In this sentence, take means, what does take mean here? Well, it means consider. And this is a very literal use of take, right? Take family size, consider it, think about it. This use of take is very common, especially in conversational English. If you're having a discussion with someone on a topic, you might say, well, take this, for example. And you're saying, consider this, think about this. All right. Plenty of surveys showed. Well, some, no, some surveys showed, no, a lot of, not some, not a few, a lot of them. Plenty of, many. I think many would be a good synonym here. So a lot of the surveys. Okay. Let's see. And 23 through 25. There's going down to 25, 23. I'm going to start at the first line. Most experts now believe that position in the family means little when taken out of the context of everything going on in a particular household, whether sibling rivalry is promoted or discouraged, for instance. Parents who believe that firstborns are more capable or deserving may treat them differently, thus setting up a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when we look at this word, everything, and it's in the italics, we see that it's kind of slanted there to the side, right? It's in a different font. When I read that, I'm of course reading out loud here, so I'm kind of talking through these, but as I am reading, even if I'm doing so silently, I'm going to have that change and that stress on the word. So position in the family means little when taken out of the context of everything going on in a particular household. Um, and so one thing I want to stress here is that italics have many different uses in English. Some textbooks will use it to introduce, vocabulary. Other textbooks will use bold. And usually where we see that, where it's bold for vocabulary word, that's a particular textbook, right? That's maybe a science textbook and they're introducing new terms. We're just looking at this article here, uh, and so this was not written, right? This was written for a health article for health, and it's not kind of this typical textbook use, or it's not a use of bold to introduce a new word. And so why is this in italics? Well, it is showing, that it's important. Right? This is kind of putting the stress, the importance on it. But also to indicate a large number. There are so many things, everything going on. There's a lot going on in a particular household. Think about your family growing up, right? Think about how complicated our days are in our, throughout our childhood, the things that we do, our sports, our hobbies, our interests. And so really they are stressing importance of the word everything, all these different things. Here to show importance. And this one's this answer, and I'll even say this question, I think is one that is easy to be thrown on. I will say I don't love the way they've kind of worded this, and that sometimes happens. I know a lot of times our concern, did I pick the right one? And I get that as someone who has spent a lot of their life as a student, and then with students. So number one here, it's stressing everything, all these different factors. If you chose a large number, I understand that. It's really importance, I think, is the stronger answer here. Do not be stressed if you chose number 3. I don't think you misunderstood anything. It's certainly not because it's a new word, but they're really they're showing the importance of all these other factors going on. Know that I would not ask a question worded with these two possible answers here. Right? So it's really the stress. Really, the stress is the factor. We want you to think about all these different factors that influence people as they're growing up and as they are living as part of a family. Okay, and let's go to, if you're following in your textbook, hopefully, we're flipping the page to 28 at this point. All right, if we go to 7B, I'm going to flip my point here. The author means that, and again, looking at just the previous one, everything. What does the author mean here? Well, everything going on, all the things that are going on are important, right? Again, what was going on in your household, in your home, your interactions with your family. All right, those are all important. It's not just this one factor of your birth order. And then C, what is the purpose of the dash? We see a dash again after household. So again, let me just go back and I'll kind of highlight that particular household, whether sibling rivalry is promoted or discouraged, for instance. And so here, it's giving an example, right? They say everything going on. For instance, is a synonym for example. And so we have an example of one thing that is going on. One thing that could be going on that would be, just as important, if not more important than birth order, right? So for instance, to give an example specifically of one thing, sibling rivalry is promoted or discouraged. So then it gets to the question of what is sibling rivalry? Our siblings are our brothers and sisters, right? Those are our siblings. And so it's not between parents, siblings always between brothers and sisters, whether it's sisters and sisters or brothers and brothers or combination. So a rival is someone you are in competition with. That's just my root word rival there. So this is sibling rivalry is competition between brothers and sisters. Right? So do the parents maybe encourage or discourage and say, well, your brother got an A, or well, your sister always remembers to take out the trash, whatever it may be, if the parents encourage or discourage that, say, oh no, discouraging sibling rivalry would be, you're all special, you have your unique traits, we don't want you to feel like you are in competition with your siblings. All right, and then E, promoted and discouraged. Again, I'm going to say that even having, I'm going to erase some of my highlight there just so it's a little bit easier to see. Promoted or discouraged. I think if you're not sure there, one helpful hint is the or, right? It can be one or the other. To promote something is to say, we want this to happen, right? In this case, we're promoting a negative, maybe, or it depends on your perception of sibling rivalry. Are they promoting sibling rivalry? Meaning they're saying, oh, let's see who can do this first, or comparing the two siblings or three siblings, however many siblings, versus discouraged, right? So again, we look at our root word there, and our prefix dis, we don't want this to happen. So want things to happen, don't want things to happen. Those are opposites, right? It's kind of the choice. It's one or the other. Those are antonyms. Those are antonyms. Our synonyms have similar meaning, antonyms have opposite meaning. Those are two different behaviors, promoting versus discouraging, or something being discouraged. All right, lines 25 through 26 as I go into number 8. Let's take a look at 25. I'm going to start at that first sentence. Parents who believe that firstborns are more capable or deserving may treat them differently thus setting up a self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, so there's a lot of interesting word use there and terms and phrases. But what does that sentence mean in general? So this sentence means that if parents treat their firstborns differently from their siblings, the firstborns will grow up the way parents expect. Right? Maybe not necessarily happy or unhappy, but right, this can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we talked about that term, self-fulfilling prophecy, that phrase a little bit in class as well, I know. Let's talk about how that might work. If parents believe, right? If your parents had a belief, let's say you're a firstborn child and your parents believe, well, you're the firstborn, you're going to be in charge, you're the eldest, you are going to be, that means that you're responsible. That's kind of the way they've always understood firstborn children are the most responsible. Then they're going to give you more responsibilities. Give you, maybe put you in charge of your other siblings, maybe have you do more chores. And if you are told your entire life as a firstborn, if you are given more responsibilities throughout your life, growing up, then you are maybe going to tend to trying to live up to that. In other words, grow up the way the parents expect, right? You become a responsible person often because you're given a lot of responsibilities and you have the expectation that you're going to live up to them. Well, that's what they're talking about with the self-fulfilling prophecy. The parents believe the firstborn will be more responsible, and so they give them more responsibilities from a young age. And as a result of being given more responsibilities, that child becomes more responsible. Going on to B here. Well, what is a prophecy, right? Just looking at just that one word there, not our whole phrase. Just prophecy in particular. So when we look at the word prophecy, I've lost my place here. All right. A prophecy is something we believe. I still lost. Let's see. Sorry, everyone. A prophecy is a prediction. And so it is something we predict will come true, something we believe will come true, not necessarily an opinion, right? We might have something we think is going to happen, that we don't like. But a prediction, we truly believe it. We truly believe it, right? It's not just an opinion. An opinion is, I think this, I like this ice cream flavor. Prediction means, oh, I believe this to be true. Okay. And then going back, a self-fulfilling prophecy. A self-fulfilling prophecy may affect your behavior and make the prophecy come true. Right? So when I look at the other two here, may make you be able to predict your own future. No, that would be nice. But that's not self-fulfilling here. It's not predicting your own prophecy. It's you are acting a certain way, or your parents giving you certain responsibilities, right? And so that influences your behavior, which influences, your personality, right? All right. 28 through 31. And this one, again, I know we talked about in class as well. Okay, so I'm going to drop down here. Right. Many experts today suggest that birth order plays no role at all, right? When Judith Blake, a demographer at the University of California, Los Angeles, looked at birth patterns before 1938 and compared them to SAT scores for that group of children, she found no connection. What is the SAT? Well, you have the word SAT here. I like showing you here on this page. It's a little bit easier to see. See that little number 1, that little number 1. That is, our little symbol that we have a footnote. And sometimes you have a list. Sometimes you might have a lot of footnotes throughout, and so we go 1, 2, 3, and that's just which note we have here. And so I look at the bottom. Now, can I look up what the SAT is? Yes. Do we all have our cell phones? We can Google that very quickly. Absolutely. Here's why you don't want to do that first, at least, if you are reading and you see a footnote. The footnote doesn't just give definitions, right? Sometimes that's one thing that a footnote can do, but it can also just give, other specific information the author maybe thought was relevant for us to know. And it also, when it does give a definition or an explanation where it's explaining something, it's going to give it within the context, meaning what is relevant to exactly that sentence you are reading. The other benefit is it doesn't take us out of the reading for as long. Once you see this and you say, well, I know it's a footnote, you can kind of just automatically drop down to the bottom of the page. You say, it's at the bottom. Quickly put kind of focus down here, read it, and go back. That's going to be, less of, take us out of the reading, less time away from the reading than even us quickly Googling the information. So what is the SAT? The SAT is the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And you didn't even need to write the rest of it. What is the SAT? It's the Scholastic Aptitude Test. That's what the acronym, right? An acronym, each letter represents a word. S is for scholastic, A is for aptitude, T is for test. What is the SAT? It's the Scholastic Aptitude Test. It's a test, students often take it in high school. Some colleges require the results of an SAT. It's not, I think, quite as commonly used as it used to be. It was a very big deal when I was in high school in the 90s. Right, but that's it. That's the SATs are the Scholastic Aptitude Test. The real purpose of this question, I'm going to be honest here, right? It's nice to know. You're saying, well, really the meaning inside the context here is, hey, did it have an impact? Did birth order have an impact in SAT? There is some very flawed connection to, intelligence, very, very flawed. And I won't go off on that tangent. But, impact on how you do academically. But the bigger reason for this question, where did you find this information, is we want to make sure, right? It's asking, do you know what a footnote is? I'm not going to kind of, write out SAT here, but I'm gonna just kind of, I guess I can put my little footnote here and I'll kind of draw with my cursor. It's a footnote. Footnote. Why on earth? Footnote. Well, it's at the foot of the text, right? If you are writing a paper in Microsoft Word, so you have the header up at the top and the footer down at the bottom. That's your footnote. If you want a very quick way to remember that, I'm going to draw badly here for just a second, right? This is my very bad drawing, and then I'm going to erase it so you don't have to look at it for the rest of our here. Oh, wait, I want my person smiling. Right. Be a very tall person. Right. And there's my what's that? Very, it's not my best work here. Not my best work, but hopefully my bad artwork will stick with you. Look where the person's head is, right? There's the head. This is the header of the paper. Look where the feet are. The feet are down here, right? The footnote is down by the feet. The feet are on the bottom. That's my footnote, right? So hopefully that the silly drawing will stick with you and you will remember that note on the bottom is called the footnote, right? So it's the footer, the footnote, that's at the bottom of the page. And if you wrote footnote here, wonderful. If you wrote at the bottom of the page, wonderful. If you said, I looked it up, okay, you found the information. But more importantly, again, my bigger concern is not that you got, a good answer here online, or even that there's anything wrong with that. But do you know what a footnote is? Do you know when you see a little number to look down at the bottom? Okay, and I go to my next question. So on the other hand, I'm going to pause for just a second here. If you hear a break, I'm going to pause. Okay. There was my slight pause. All right. On the other hand, and again, we're at 20, 28 through 30 still. Here's my on the other hand. All right. On the other hand is a very common transitional phrase showing contrast. On the one hand, on the other hand, right? Saying, well, we've looked at one side, let's look at the other. So on the other hand, what is, well, first, I've just answered, right? We have that transitional phrase. It's an opposing, to oppose something, to be against. It's the opposite, right? Right, and then it's saying, okay, why is number in italics? The number of siblings. Okay. So again, if you wrote here on the line, I'm gonna write one answer, and that is to to stress the importance. That is fine. I think the real issue here is stress the importance of number versus birth order. Number of siblings. Versus birth order. Why I just right? But places the stress again as I'm reading, saying, don't look at the birth order, look at the number, how many siblings. That's much more of a factor. Okay. Looking at 33 through 34 here. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to start with the reason here. First full sentence in 33. The reason she believes is that parental attention is diluted in larger families. And again, we talked about this one in class quite a bit. It's not that people with large families don't pay as much attention to their children. It's simply diluted, meaning if you have an hour to spend with your children to help them with their homework, and that's just what we have, right? We have outside things we need to do. If that's the time available between maybe coming home from work and eating dinner, and you have one child, that child is going to get the hour. If you have two children, each might get a half an hour. If you have four children, each might get 15 minutes. And we know in reality, that's not the way it usually gets divided, right? We know that maybe one child needs more help, and maybe, another needs less, and it's maybe divided that way. But it's saying just the time, right? The attention is diluted. If you are, if each of your siblings has an activity, right? There's only two parents, or one parent, or if you have step siblings and all the different combinations of families that we have, if it's a greater number of children, can kind of outnumber the number of parents there. Say each one's going to get a little bit less focus, just attention available to them. So when we talk about diluted, something being diluted, it is reduced. And again, I think, kind of that analogy is if we add a packet of lemonade mix to a glass of water, that's going to be a glass of lemonade. If I add the same packet of lemonade powder to a gallon of water, it's going to be more diluted, right? It's going to be a little more watered down. And the more I add, the less it's going to kind of be able to really infuse everything with lemonade flavoring. All right. Let's see. Number 11, 35 through 38. As for effects on personality, results are mixed. Research suggests that you're somewhat more likely to be outgoing, well-adjusted, and independent if you grew up with few or no siblings. Two recent studies, however, found no difference on the basis of size alone. The only certainty is that there don't seem to be any disadvantages to growing up in a small family, including being an only child. So when we say, the results are mixed, let's see, and here's my results are mixed. So results are mixed. Different people got different results, right? It's mixed. So some studies found one thing, other studies found others, for a number of reasons. So different people got different results. we talk about mixed, mixed means varied. They got a variety. This is one time, this is another example, I should say, of where looking at the context of the word, not just looking at a definition, is going to get you a very different answer, right? If I looked in the dictionary at the word mixed, one of the top answers, right? It goes by what's kind of most common. It might be to combine. I know if I am someone who bakes or cooks, I know I mix ingredients, I combine them. But in this context of results are mixed, meaning they got a variety, they got different answers here within the context of these studies. Right. Number 12, I'm looking at 43 to 44. Okay, so here's let's see. I'm going to write down here. If position, right? So I'm under, do kids need more space? Right? Space has a lot of, just looking at that subheading, space has a lot of different meanings here, but it has a particular use when it's talking about spacing here. If position doesn't control destiny and family size has only a minor impact, what about spacing between children? And here, let's see, this is one where I keep reading past. Although little research has been conducted, some psychologists believe there are more advantages to having kids far apart rather than close together. And so again, this is one where if you're not sure the meaning of a word, or even here the meaning of a term, a phrase that's being used, right? If I read through the next sentence, often I'll get lots of good context clues. And so I'm going to go to here and say, having kids far apart rather than close together. Well, spacing between children is talking about how many years, right? How many years are there between the children, right? Is there a difference between having siblings that are a year and a half apart, right? One is a year and a half older versus having children that are 3 years, apart. One was born 3 years later or 5 years, or that is the spacing, how many years in between there. And so when I look at my answer, spacing between children, it's not about where they are standing. It's about how far apart children are in age. Right. All right, 47 through 48. This is eyebrow raising news. I know I gave this example as we were reading. If I'm raising my eyebrows, that is usually I'm showing that I am surprised about something, right? If you're not sure, look in a mirror, raise your eyebrows. What expression are you making? This is a common term, right? This is common. This phrase in general is synonymous. It's a similar meaning to being surprised. All right, so that's a common use of that term. 52 through 53. Okay, jumping down here. As with birth order, cautions about jumping to conclusions. Underline that there. May be ignored by the general public. So if I say a conclusion, right? A conclusion is Well, we've gotten a lot of information here throughout this article. And when we talk about a conclude, what's the point here? What, conclude, what is the findings? What are the findings? Jumping to them, right? Jumping, just think of someone actually jumping, right? From kind of, more very bad stick figures here. We're kind of jumping over, if you can interpret that as a person, they're kind of pole vaulting, I think. You're maybe jumping over some of the facts, getting to it very quickly, your conclusion, and saying, oh, yeah, well, this seems to be true. That seems good enough. This is how we get to myths, right? Birth order myths. We jump to conclusions and say, well, this seems to be true from what I observed, but maybe not looking at, what's true for other families, or not looking at other influences. That's jumping to conclusions. Myths are really often jumping to conclusions. So to jump to a conclusion is deciding something without having enough facts. And then, of course, 15 we talked about in class. Some people like to believe that birth order affects personality, right? That is really what this article is discussing here, is the fact that these myths do exist. There are a lot of them. They need to talk about them in order to kind of disprove or say, well, this is not, we're jumping to conclusions here. People like to believe them. And the last line in the text, you're never going to completely put to rest what people think is fun to believe. You're never going to convince everyone on earth that these myths are not true. Right? They talk about the myths throughout. Some people like to believe them, although there is no evidence. And the text is really looking at what is the evidence, right? We don't have the evidence. What does the, sorry about that, what does the research show? All right, and we have reached our analysis, end of our analysis. Thank you, everyone. And again, I'm going to post more, and we will discuss later tonight.